Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. We are a faith-based social justice forum where individuals give their perspectives on various topics. It's an opportunity to express their viewpoint, their stance, and their angle on justice issues affecting the community and globally. Each episode features guests presenting their perspective on things like climate change, the church, urban farming, and food insecurity, all through a unique faith lens. Come check us out. Give us your perspective. Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. I'm Lyra Lane White, and I'm your host. Thank you for joining our first ever Women's Laboratory. This segment is the start of a dialogue focusing specifically on the impacts of latest events on and how it affects Black African American males in our lives. The death of George Floyd has brought to the forefront uh, that racism and discrimination are still a chronic part of the African American male experience. This event has highlighted the need for more dialogue concerning the experience of racism and discrimination of Black males. It's interesting to note that just a month before George Floyd's death, a Pew Research Center survey found that 56% of Black Americans surveyed said that they had at least a fair amount of confidence in police officers to act in the best interest of the public, along with 84% of white and 74% of Hispanic adults expressing the same notion. Well, these views have changed very little over the years, according to the Pew Research Center. However, what we've heard over the past few weeks, particularly from Black men, is how much they strongly identify with the issues of racism and discrimination in America. And that these incidents, like George Floyd's death and Ahmaud Arbery, exacerbate feelings of low self-esteem, anxiety, and a challenge to their belief about their experiencing differential treatment on the basis of their race, and most importantly, their gender. Tonight, in our first ever Perspective On's Women's Laboratory, we intend to respond to those challenges. I've asked a group of women to join us in dialogue and give their perspective on how they feel, and what they've been experiencing, and how they and give some advice and some input on how our African American males can navigate the conflicts that are related to the experiences that they've had on racism and discrimination, all from our perspective. And so tonight I have a group of ladies, and I'm going to let them just introduce themselves a little bit. Dr. Malone, why don't you start? I'll let you start.
I'm having trouble hearing. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
The first reaction that I received was that of young men, my son and my husband, the anger and the frustration of the continued abuse and lack of value in their lives. And so, as a Black woman, as a mother, as a wife, the one thing that I can do is listen and just remind them that they are valuable.
Gotcha.
Their life is valuable and their life matters.
Okay.
And so as a community, for us, we just need to be able to wrap our arms around them to remind them that they matter, that their life is valuable, and that we stand in support of them, and that they have the right to breathe.
Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and just kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are? Dr. Malone, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay. All right. Nakira, why don't you tell us a little bit, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Nakira. I am currently the operations manager at a nonprofit organization in Richmond, Virginia called Girls for a Change. At Girls for a Change, we do we teach social justice work to young girls, specifically Black girls in the city of Richmond, Virginia, and we are trying to get our reach to be all over. So we do lots of work in the community based around Black girls.
Awesome. Awesome. That's good stuff. Let's see, Paula and Alyssa, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about who you are and where you are, and tell us about yourself.
Okay, well, Paula, you can go first. Okay, well, I'm Paula Granston, and I'm a recent college graduate from Johns Hopkins University. Graduated 3 weeks ago with a dual degree in public health and Spanish. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm really interested in expanding healthcare access so that everyone would have access to comprehensive, affordable, and quality healthcare, regardless of their geographical region, their socioeconomic status, their race, their health status, or anything. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Yep. And I'm Alyssa. I'm also graduated about 3 weeks ago from Johns Hopkins University with an English degree and minors in social policy and computer science. And I am planning on moving out to California soon to do some technical writing for a cybersecurity company. But outside of that work, I plan on volunteering and doing educational tutoring and trying to really connect with Black folks out in the Bay.
Okay, very good, very good. Dr. Malone, are you still having some problems? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, Dr. Malone is she is a licensed pastoral care person, and she has her very own pastoral care and counseling center, and she does a lot of work with families in terms of Christian counseling. And I'm just happy to have her here on tonight. And let's see, Nakira. Let's just go ahead and jump into our discussion. And I will, while I try to see what's going on with Dr. Malone, would you kindly, we're talking about, what we're talking about tonight. And like I said, a Pew Center survey taken before George Floyd's death reported that Black and white Americans say that Black people are treated less fairly than white in dealing with the police and by the criminal justice system as a whole. In fact, their 2019 survey reported that 84% of adults say that in dealing with police, Blacks are generally treated less fairly than whites, and that 63% they said the same. So we've had a lot of activists talk about police brutality, particularly when it comes to Black men, for years. But it's now that more attention is being given to this issue worldwide. In fact, civil rights activist Angela Davis, in a recent, it was recently quoted as saying, "I don't know if we've ever experienced this kind of global challenge to racism and to the consequences of slavery and colonialism." So having said all that and thinking about all of that, can you identify at least one reaction that you received when you've heard an African American male react to these to the recent events, especially when it comes to the George Floyd incident?
Okay. I actually would. I actually would say that I do have a younger brother, and of course, I have a father. My father and I have not discussed too much about this situation, but I definitely check in with my brother. He's 19 years old, so he's in that Generation Z that we like to talk so much about. And his concerns to me is just really not understanding. I think he has a different perspective because he is much younger. not understanding, not really afraid too much, but very concerned. So very heartbroken. But I think because he doesn't really have a great understanding as to why things like this are going on, and it's not the first conversation that we've had. At only 19 years old here in Georgia, my brother has been pulled over numerous times and has only had his license for maybe about a year or two. And I know for a fact that he has been pulled over just for no reason, because oftentimes it doesn't result in a ticket. And not saying that, I know sometimes we are able to get out of tickets, but what's the reason that he's being pulled over for in the first place? So he's had interactions with the police. My father has had interactions with them as well. At Girls for a Change, we definitely have many girls that we encounter who have members of their family who have interactions with the police. And later on, when there's a different question asked, I'll be able to explain a little bit more about how we at Girls for a Change have that important relationship with girls and their fathers, and how the police and the criminal justice system affect that relationship as well.
Got you. Do you girls have anything to add, Paula, Ann, and Alyssa?
Well, I could say that I actually participate in a Black Bible study on our campus, and it's still going on even despite the school year having ended. And we did have a conversation discussing like how we feel about everything. And my sense from the males in the group is that they're kind of really struggling with how to make sense of the way they're being treated, and trying to reconcile that with a biblical belief that they should, continue to move forward, and that God has a way for them and will continue to love them, and as long as they have faith in them. So I see this struggle to reconcile faith and like the activities happening right here, and how they are unable to really exist freely and experience that joy in a way without having to worry about, whether they're going to be pulled over or whether they're going to fit the description just for being Black. So I think for those in the faith community, they're really trying to reconcile these faith beliefs and their existence and how they're treated.
Absolutely. And it's amazing because when, like Nakira, when you talked about, your brother only having his driver's license for just a year or so, and he's being pulled over, it's amazing because when I was in college, I traveled. I went to college in Houston, Texas, and I traveled. I mean, I would come home on a dime. I mean, and never have I been pulled over, or even driving around here and driving in Texas with out-of-state tags. I've never been pulled over, just random. But I hear especially when I was in college, I hear all kinds of stories about being pulled over by state troopers, by city police, and sometimes it resulted in a ticket, sometimes it didn't. But definitely from a faith perspective, a lot of Black men have some issues, and that's part of their their experience, and they're part of their racial identities. Like, who are they in the church? Which that's another conversation, I know, but we could talk about that a little bit. But when you go to our churches, we're just kind of looking at it from a faith perspective. Then I'm gonna shut up. Black males, when you look at the congregations, it's majority females. And I think what I'm thinking is, and based on the conversations that I've had with Black men especially, is that their experience, their racial identity, and their experience as a Black male don't line up with what their faith teachings are. I mean, an African American woman or a woman, it would seem, will get a different kind of covering from God than he would from a man. And so, and that's a little bit about what I've been hearing over the years, especially since I've been in the ministry. Dr. Malone, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. I think one of the issues that our Black men face today, from past to present, is that when we were enslaved, our ancestors was enslaved. They groomed women to be strong, so we had to work in the house and in the field and care for our kids as well as their children. But our men were never groomed to be men. They were taught to be boys and to remain as boys. And so I think that dynamic is still present today. I have witnessed personally my husband, who is a grown man in he's 53. Um, a Caucasian man will walk up to him and speak to him as if he is a boy, a child, and not his equal. And so, not only with my husband, but many Black men that I've had the opportunity to be around have experienced that same. And I think we have to be mindful that, and to remind them that they are worthy, they are loved, they are human. For me, they are created in the image of God, and they are due every right as everyone else, especially the opportunity that God created them to be able to breathe, to walk, driving while Black, walking while Black, speaking while Black. Can be it's a different challenge and a different lens for them. It's from corporate America to our community at large. And I think that it's up to us as Black women to continue to love them and to remind them that they are worthy and that they don't have to be or become anyone else, that they are okay the way that God created them in their own skin and their own right, no matter what hue or color they may be.
Jumping off of that point, I like how you said just validating Black men as they exist right now, because a common response that I've seen on social media, especially among people, me, Alyssa, and my age, is Black people have this urge to prove their humanity and their work or their accomplishments. And I'm not a thug, I have a PhD. And you don't need the PhD to be worthy. And even if you were a thug, you shouldn't be killed during a traffic stop for not signaling. Even if you were a criminal, and even if you did have tattoos and your pants were sagging and you were in prison, even if all those things were true, you still deserve to be treated as a human being by officials of the state who are sworn to serve and protect. And me and Alyssa have a unique experience because we both have cousins that have died of police violence. My cousin was murdered last month by a cop in the airport. And my cousin, if say that situation had gotten big, just as George Floyd, what would white people say? They would say, didn't your cousin spend a lot of his life in prison? And I would say yes. And wasn't your cousin this? And didn't your cousin do this? And I would say yes. And even though he didn't have a PhD, and even though he didn't align with respectability politics, and even though he didn't go to this school and graduate from here, he still didn't deserve to be murdered by a police officer who's given a gun and given power over other people's lives and destinies. So,
and then same for me, like my cousin had some mental illnesses, and I mean, the police officers in the body cam footage acknowledge this mental illness, and then they still think that at one point he becomes unconscious after having been brought to the station instead of the hospital, which he should have brought first, and they think he's acting because he's unconscious. I don't know why they would think that, but just this perception that this maltreatment of members with mental illness and just an inability to deal with those things, and having that be something that makes them less than is something that plagues police, the institution.
It does. It does. And
I think that impacts the relationship too, Dr. Lorraine, because of the enslavement and the destruction of the Black family, to take the Black man out of the home, to take the Black man away from raising his children. All of those different dynamics play a part in the psyche and the development of the mind and the identity of the Black man. And I think we as a community have a large responsibility to be able to dismantle what was done in slavery, because they're not defined. It does not matter if they went to jail and served time. You did your time, you out. You still a citizen. You still a human created in the image of God. You still have agency. And so that's the thing for me. This is about humanity.
That's right.
They are human. They are created in the image of God. So whether their pants are sagging, whether they don't have a belt on, whether they don't look the way that people think they should look, they are still human.
That's right.
And we need to stop allowing society to treat them as less than animals. That is very problematic.
It is.
So the thing for me is they dehumanize.
Dishonor.
They dehumanize them. And so that's just another impact on the psyche to for them to view themselves as less than. And you're right, you don't have to have a PhD to be human.
Mhm.
Right? The fact that you are here, God created you, you have a right to breathe. You are created in God's image and you are human. And so your humanity should not be based or deemed because of the color of your hair, the texture of your hair, whether you are locks, whether you shaved, clean, none of that matters. None of that should be depicted because of or deemed inhumane or humane.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so, because one of the things that over the years, I've come to realize is just to kind of piggyback on what you said, Dr. Myrna, is that there has been a generational uh, a mindset that's been passed on, and I think and it's interesting that you go back to slavery, because in slavery, I think slavery taught African American men about internalization. And so even going back to that time, they began to internalize, those feelings of inferiority, to another race, or inferiority, and if you read the Constitution in its early form, and how they defined African American males as being, what was it, 3/5 of a man. And so a lot of Black men over the years, I think, going back 3-4 generations, internalized that, and in their own ways, I believe that they unintentionally passed that mindset down, and that's what we're seeing. That's what
Yeah.
we still hear that in everybody's voices today.
And we call that intergenerational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And it's embodied and it is unconscious. But I think that we have a responsibility in our community to be able to dismantle that.
We have to dismantle.
It's up to us.
I believe that.
It's up to us. We cannot sit and wait for other people to give to them what we have to give to them. And the whole definition of calling them a thug, I don't even think is appropriate. Because they look different, dress different, walk different, speak different, they a thug. Because of the community they live in, they a thug. No, I don't see it that way.
Right.
The person who's getting paid to kill people, that's not thuggish behavior. And they go home to their wife and kids after literally murdering and slaughtering people's children. That's not thuggish behavior. So it's like they're allowed, like white people are allowed to exist in violence without being cast as the violent one. Like colonization and 400 years of slavery and 150 years of Jim Crow and segregation doesn't matter. We're still the ones to be feared. We're still the ones that are violent. We're still the ones that are dangerous, but it doesn't matter what we do. If we're carrying Skittles or iced tea, we're the ones that are dangerous and have the target on our back.
Absolutely. And I think that we have a challenge to tell our story, because the one who tells the story has the power. And so that's why we, Black men, Black girls, Black boys, we have to be able to utilize our voice, because our narrative, we have to tell our narrative. We have to tell our story, and we cannot allow other people to speak for us or to tell our story.
Yes.
Yeah. I think if we're intentional as a community, especially as Black women, if we are intentional on dismantling that, what has been internalized about especially Black men over the years, if we're intentional about developing a strategy to dismantle that mindset, then I almost feel like we'll be on our way to a solution to what we're seeing today in terms of especially police brutality among and African American men. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then a couple of weeks ago, we had here in Atlanta, we had an incident where a couple college students were riding in downtown Atlanta, and there was an incident with, I think it was 6 Atlanta police officers. I kind of want to get some, I kind of want us to talk about that a little bit because I got a variety when I'm speaking to millennials. I got one set of opinions from speaking to millennials, and I got another set of opinions speaking to younger persons, younger than millennials. And then I got a whole nother perspective. I mean, it was just different and different among men, among males. I kind of want to get some, you ladies tell me, talk about how you feel about that. What's, and I don't know, where do we go from here in terms of that incident?
So I think that incident in particular, it's really amazing to me right now to see protests being held about police brutality to be met with more police brutality. That's really ironic in itself. That situation in particular was not surprising to me. I think it really came off of the back of those comments that were made by the mayor and T.I. and Killer Mike, well, specifically T.I. about this being Wakanda and that type of behavior. And since I've moved down here, I've gotten that perspective from a few people who believe that Atlanta is like a mecca or a safe haven for Black people. And so I think that moment was really interesting to watch, just to see how that's not the case for a lot of people. Atlanta is special because there are so many Black people who have been able to come and make a different life and make a better life and have those opportunities. And that situation proved that that's not the same for everybody. It also proved a different viewpoint, because a lot of times when we look at police brutality, we look at a white cop doing something, brutalizing a Black body. Mm-hmm. And that instance that we saw, those were Black cops that were brutalizing Black bodies as well. And so that's when we see, I do believe, you will never hear me not say that police brutality or the police and criminal justice system is not inherently a racist institution. However, you can see that those racist institution and that belief is passed down to people who join that police force. They may not go inside with that type of mindset, but once you get into a system or an organization like that, it is passed down to you. And of course, we know that those Black people are not racist against Black. That would be something that's anti-Black. So it was very sad for me to see that, but it also just flipped that coin on its head to where we get the vision as to where it's the police system as a whole that needs whatever you want to say, defunding, reform, abolishing, whatever you believe in. We see that something has to change.
I think that it just, because a lot of the time, I don't think of myself as a pessimistic person, but when I hear that idea of the rough, rogue Black cop changing the system from the inside, it just disappoints me, because I think that it's just extremely lazy thinking. And Black people have always been around, and it's 2020. Wouldn't we have changed it from the inside by now? It's a really long operation. So I think that this is a perfect example of how to look at how those opinions are naive and how they've been disproven just by us existing and us still having this problem in 2020. And I think even though they are Black officers, I think it's just symbolic of this country's hate for Black love. Like, the Black community is the only community where Black women were incentivized with government money if they didn't have a Black father in the home. No other community has ever received an incentive for being a single parent home. Like, these things, like you said, Dr. Malone, this dysfunction being supported and the disillusionment of the Black nuclear family. You don't even go into the TV and see a Black nuclear family anymore. And things like that. Living single, where are those things? All the shows that me and Alyssa watch, every single teeny bopper show, it's all interracial couples. And if the girl is dark skinned, she's not going to be with a Black man, she's going to be with a white man. And you'd be lucky if the character was dark skinned. And if she is, she's the sidekick, she's not the lead character. So just small subliminal things, and it all comes together to make this one monster of racism. And it's not going to be changed with the idealistic guy who just graduated college and think he's going to overturn hundreds of years of this system. It's not going to happen.
Well, we know. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nakira.
Oh no, I was just gonna say when she made that comment about the one good person coming in and making a change. I know we're talking about police brutality right now, but those are systems all over. I was a former educator, and I had the idea that I was gonna come in and I would be able to make a difference. Yes, I was able to make a difference in individual children's life, but on the system as a whole, there was nothing that I was going to be able to do to stop that monster, because at this day and age, it is a complete monster. And with this, with the George Floyd incident making this, I'm sad that it had to happen this way. There are so many different conversations that are coming up because of what we see, and the education system is one of them. But I just wanted to say, yes, I do believe that it is a naive belief to think that one person can come in and change even several people, when I always hear to say the system is failing us. The system is not failing us. The system is set up to happen the way that it's happened. It's not failing us. It's working.
It's working. Yeah. Well-oiled machine.
That's when Dr. Murner's her position comes into play. The system is set up. I have this argument all the time with my colleagues about the voting system, the way we elect our president, just the legal system. It's set up. I mean, some of the most brilliant people in the history of this country set it up, and it does work. It's tried and proved. The problem is that as a community, we have to be intentional on creating a safe place for both African American as well as those of what are we saying these days? Black and brown.
Black and brown.
That where we set the conditions to where we are reversing or we're dismantling those mindsets that we have it within our community. So the system was designed to work, and people say all the time, "Oh, it works for white people." Okay, but it can work for us too. All we have to do is be able to go about it and check the way. It's all in how we engage the process, and it's our mindset. Because for the African American male, it's my belief that the African American males go into certain situations with a certain mindset of what their experience is going to be. And it does impact what happens. It does. And so, and even if we don't see that it does, it really does. And so that's really my, I don't know, that's my perspective on things. I want you ladies to do more talking than me. I love what you're saying. And Dr. Ducksworth, are you familiar with Amanda Ducksworth, Paula Ann?
No.
Okay, well, she liked what you said. That's why I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you.
I am. I know Dr. Amanda.
Oh, you know? Okay.
I saw her comment. Thank you.
So listen. Okay, the other thing that I wanted us to talk about, because a lot of talk has been going on about. I'm just trying to get my notes together. About this, the Justice and Policing Act, because we're talking about a little bit about police brutality. And okay, I see the thumbs down. The Congressional Black Caucus is giving it a thumbs up, though. So that's good. Let's just talk about that a little bit. And how is that going to impact? If you have you had conversations with any males about how they feel? I know I have, about how they feel about this Justice and Policing Act. Anybody?
A lot of the males I know are radical communists, so they're not with it either. I would say that I'm glad that we're trying. Like, it's the reality, and we're in the real world, and we have to work within the systems that we have. Are they really going to abolish the police force? No, I don't think they are. So we have to. That's true, Dr. Ducksworth. I shouldn't have that defeatist mindset. But I know we have to work within these systems. But I genuinely do not think that there is any way to reform a system that originated from catching runaway slaves and bringing them back and killing them. It's cancer. It's not going to happen. So I appreciate the effort, and something has to be done. But a lot of the things I saw in the Justice and Policing Act were just moving the meter in excessive force, and in a cop getting arrested, just moving it a little bit to the right. So one person who wouldn't have gotten arrested before, now the threshold of excessive force and deadly force is moved just a little bit. So maybe 3 more people will go to jail. But the fact is that cops can say whatever they want to say after someone's killed, and their lieutenant is going to back them because they don't want the press and they don't want the attention. So if all the cop has to say is, I was in fear of my life, then what's the difference? Because that's what they say now.
Right. But see, that's supposedly the Justice and Policing Act of 2020 is supposed to change the way that we hold officers accountable. So it won't be that easy for a police officer to say, well, I thought I was in fear of my life, and the whole body cam thing. So, you have to convince us that what we're seeing on a body cam is different from what you say it was. You have to convince us that, you weren't using excessive force, when it looks like, well, when I'm sitting here and I'm watching you tase someone that's saying, I'm going to get out the car, I'm going to get out, I'm going to get out, I'm going to get out, and you still tase them anyway. Mm-hmm. So you saying you feel like your life was in danger, yet they were not armed. You were. You set off the taser, but they were. I mean, I don't know. So you feel like, so are you saying then, Paula, that the bill just lacks that brand of transparency that's needed to make sure?
Right. I think that overall, any reform of policing is ineffective and futile because policing is unjust period. That's just what I believe. I don't think that any human can have enough power to have that much power over another human to take their life. I don't believe in capital punishment either. I feel like God has that power and humans are running around playing God. So that's what I believe personally. But I appreciate the effort, but a lot of what I read in the reform, I see it as just ticking the meter just 1 or 2 to the right. Like, I don't see any real vast change. Like, oh, the system is different. I don't think so. A couple more people might go to jail, but they write the reports and they can say whatever they want.
Yeah. And now definitely the bill and its 134 page form is going to need some work on it before it's even passed. A lot of people are already saying it's not going to pass. But
the way it's drafted, Dr. Lorraine, and you ladies, it's on a federal level, and so then the state got to buy into it. So it's not done on a state and city level where all of these killings of our Black men and Black women are taking place, and so they have to buy into the federal in order to adapt it. They have to agree. Threatening to hold money, is that really going to help? I think the issue has to do with the psychological mindset of people who become police officers. Some police officers should not be policing.
Yes.
They should not be officers because psychologically, you got people coming in there and they just racist, period. Or they have an issue with wanting power and dominion to have over other people, and that's the issue. I'm going to show you who's in charge. I'm going to show you, and that's the issue.
I wanted to circle back to something that Paula said. I think I sadly share the same mindset, is that I don't think that the police will ever be abolished. And I am in the mindset as well as I think we're a little bit too late for reform. However, I have been looking and researching a little bit about what defunding the police actually looks like and what that means. I do not by any means consider myself to be an expert on the topic, but when I start to look at these budgets and see how police in some cities are getting hundreds of millions of dollars, our education system, our community systems are getting like pennies compared to that. I can think of where I work at Girls for a Change, for example, who we are literally in the community. We are one of those grassroots organizations that are trying to combat are because, like Dr. Malone said, it's not just our Black boys, it's our Black girls as well. And so we are in a space to where we are trying to combat those things before it even gets out into the street. And so that, I believe, those are where those funds should be going. They should be going into our community so we can have people in our community that can support each other. We don't need police in our community to be funded hundreds of millions of dollars for what? We don't need police officers in our schools if we have more counselors. Because as a former teacher, I can absolutely say that anytime that a child came to me and they were angry or they wanted to fight, it was always because there was an underlying issue. And quite frankly, our cops, they are not trained to figure out what those underlying issues were. But because we are in a school where we are in a country where counselors are being split between 2 and 3 schools, but every school has enough money to have police officers inside of the school, that's a problem. Our money needs to be going towards community support. So like an organization like Girls for a Change, who is constantly working to support our communities. And we know that when we support girls and women in our community, we are going to give it back. We go out and we turn it into 100 times over. Money needs to be going to community initiatives, again, like a Girls for a Change, that helps to educate our girls, that helps to provide resource and access to a lot of things that we just don't have in our community.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like we need to be transitioning to this community public safety model where it's not we're having these people coming from other communities trying to tell us and trying to police us. It needs to be community members trying to, maintain the peace, mediate conflicts between family members. No one should be calling the police trying to have an issue handled with their family and then end up with a family member dead. And you need to have people that are social workers or trained to deal with mental health crises. We shouldn't be having people who have no kind of experience with these social issues coming in trying to attack these issues. That's it.
Yep.
Absolutely. And it's sad that we can invest all that money in policing when our students don't even have all of the books that they need. So some students have books and others don't.
Exactly. And I just think it goes to show that, okay, because we go to school in Baltimore City, obviously, Johns Hopkins, and Johns Hopkins has a very, very bad relationship with the neighboring community because of their historical and current unethical practices. And I've been working in some nonprofit environments during my undergrad experience, and 15 minutes down the road, these kids don't have heating, they don't have air, the books are falling apart, they have a terrible student to teacher ratio. But then right here where we are, just a 15-minute drive up, the schools look like Hogwarts. They look like castles. And it's not a coincidence that in Margaret Brent, these students are heavily policed. They're children. Some of them are 5 years old. And Margaret Brent is a very, very, very heavily policed school. And so you're raising these kids in this environment. Like, I'm watching you. You're dangerous. You're a criminal. You're not going anywhere. Like, just putting these things in their heads from such a young age. And then you want to say things like Black on Black crime.
Oh, right.
But the larger question is, where did they learn those behaviors from?
Right.
Where was that violence learned from? They always put the finger at us. We're the criminals, we're the violent ones. But
exactly,
if we step back and just take a look at how America became America, who was here first? Fighting wars to take different countries to make them a part of the U.S. You got the Mexican War. When we talk about civil disobedience, civil disobedience came about because of slavery.
I love it.
Because of slavery. And we as a people, we have to prepare ourselves. When going through seminary at ITC, Dr. Earl Riggins told us a Bible on one hand and a newspaper in another, because we have to be prepared. And it's just saying, oh, if you don't want Black people to know about it, put it in a book.
Yeah, that's an old saying. I don't know. Paula and Alyssa.
And that bothers me. I know. So
What?
for me as a Black mother, I was intentional about educating my children, not about what they learned in the school, but me teaching them about African American history and me teaching them that we didn't come over here as slaves, but we were enslaved. And it's a different, and me teaching them that, you know, they were the best over here.
Mm-hmm.
We were the best. We were kings and queens, you know, and they enslaved us, you know? And so we see the ramifications in this intergenerational trauma that we have been experiencing since slavery. And so the question is, where do we go from here?
Absolutely.
You know, we have to use our voice. We have to take action.
That's right.
You know, and if we don't agree with something, we have to stand up against it.
Yes. Now, I'm glad you brought the subject of civil disobedience up, because I think it's really important, especially for this generation, to understand, you know, where's the meaning of civil disobedience and how it has been used in effective nonviolent intervention, effective protest. I keep saying every week, I'm always saying there is indeed an art to moral protest.
Yes.
And so you have to be able to, you know, in order for that to be effective. But what I'm hearing, though, is that, hey, you know, we've been morally protesting for years and it was to no avail. But we have some fine examples of how effective moral protest has indeed worked. But a lot of people are taking those examples and saying, there's examples and saying, oh, well, yeah, but it was after some violence happened. Yeah, but see, we're not gonna discount the how people feel, and I really feel like demonstrations and riots are all, you know, there's a lot of emotion under those things. A lot of the energy that comes that fuels a riot is begins and founded in emotion, and so they don't just happen in, like Dr. King said, they don't just happen in a vacuum. They happen because of the feelings that people have, because they don't feel like they're being heard. Well, they have been heard, and if they had not been heard, then there would be nothing for us to stand up and protest about. So civil disobedience is something that I'm interested in hearing what your definitions of civil disobedience are. Did you all, Paula and Alyssa and Nakira, I'd love to hear your perspectives. We can, Dr. Malone and I can talk about it all day, but I really love to hear your perspectives on this, on the whole notion of civil disobedience and the emotion that's coming from protest.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I think of civil disobedience, I think of freedom riders and sit-ins, and I do have like very healthy respect for that type of protest. And I would never disrespect my ancestors and say that type of protest is in no way effective, because we're still talking about it. But I think there is a reason why U.S. history textbooks only want to put that in textbooks. I think that that's purposeful and want to ignore the other things that did happen. The way that I look at it is there's a place for everything. When I do see rioting and looting, there's no space in my heart for don't do that. And I know why. It's because if the people who built this country want to burn it down, they can, especially because even after everything that they've been through, they're still getting murdered for no reason. And I feel like people can't say that it's not effective, because George Floyd's murderers are in jail. They wouldn't have been in jail otherwise. They wouldn't have been. Breonna Taylor's case was open. That wouldn't have happened. They're only going to do things if attention comes to it. And rioting and looting is the voice of the oppressed. And looting, who's being looted? Target, Walmart, these companies who systemically discriminate against Black workers. They don't give them any health benefits. Amazon doesn't even let their workers go in the bathroom. I'm not crying any tears for these capitalist kings who have gotten their wealth and their notoriety through working off the backs of other people who tend to look like me. I'm not crying for Target. I'm not crying for Walmart. I'm crying for George Floyd, and I'm crying for the people who are actually dead and buried for no reason. So I don't have any smoke for rioting and looting. I don't.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times they're kind of juxtaposed against each other. It's like peaceful and not peaceful, right? And I think that kind of takes things away. We can't just make things into a binary, like, oh, these people, all of a sudden their perspective is no longer important because they were violent. I think that's where a lot of these conversations go. whenever there is that mention of civil disobedience and why can't we be peaceful? And I think that takes away the problem. At the end of the day, police do not have the power they do. People need to be held accountable. And it's not like we need to be telling people, hey, your voice no longer matters because of this action you're doing. At the end of the day, there's something that sparked that. And I think that almost needs more attention than, the method necessarily.
Right.
Okay.
I do want to interject something.
Go ahead, Paula.
If you are looting Black businesses and you know it's a Black business or a small business, that's not good. Riot and loot Target. Because they're the ones who have been ruining lives for having, especially Walmart. I'm not crying any tears for Walmart. Okay, Dr. Malone.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I'm not coming up against. No, I don't like violence. Period. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the death penalty. I don't agree with killing people. I believe that that's a God, right? But I do believe that we can refocus our energy otherwise, like making sure we go vote.
Right.
Even if they try to turn us away and we got to stand in line for 9 hours, even if it's in the rain. So for me, I remember that people died in order to give me that right? To not vote is for me making a vote against us. That's number one. Number two is we do have power. We have power in our pocket because African Americans run the economy. If you step back and you look, every time there was a recession, who was not working? Who was not shopping? Who was not spending their money? Who's in Target? Who's in Walmart? Who's at the beauty supply store? Who's the ones that's constantly shopping? We can live in an apartment and drive a Mercedes Benz, right? And so for me, another way that we can protest is to withhold our money and maybe be intentional about shopping at Black-owned businesses.
Yes.
Right? It may be a little out the way, but as a community, we have to come together. We have to be able to say, okay, enough is enough. This is what I'm going to do for my community because I value my Black skin, the skin I'm in, no matter what hue I am. I value it so much that I will go out of my way to shop at a Black store. I will go out of my way to only eat at a Black restaurant. I will go out of my way to order online from Black companies, right? And so if we withhold our money, we withhold our power, right? And so it's okay for us to protest with a sign in one hand, but we also, how many of us was at voting out on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Or voted early?
It better overlap completely.
Absolutely. So I just want us to recognize that, yes, we have power collectively when we come together. Withhold our money and be intentional about supporting Black people, Black and brown people, and be intentional about voting for every election, not just the presidential. Right?
Yeah.
Because you have to have change on the city and state level, on the county level, right? As well as on the federal level, right? And if there's one thing I have learned since the person who's in the White House now, is that we need to get out and vote like never before. Because all I see is dissension, division, and for me, we have to come together as a community. Yes, we have Black on Black crime. Yes, but where did it stem from? We got to go a little deeper. We just can't show, Black on Black crime, we're killing each other, so it's okay for the police to kill us. No, it's not. Where did that mindset come from?
Yeah.
Who taught it to them? And why are we killing one another? We need to step back and we need to go back, right, in order to move forward, right? We need to know our history. We need to know why we behave while we behave. We need to know why we view women while we view women. We need to understand how we end up in relationships that we end up in. All of that is interrelated. You cannot have one without the other. Yeah. They're all interrelated. It's like an onion, and we have to unravel. We have to unpeel the onion and dig a little deeper. And I opened my practice, MHT Family Life Center, focus on providing mental health and care for Black women. Because when I was doing my research, white women had all of the care, all of the help, all of the resources there was not one thing that I found for African American women. We might have one clinic, but I didn't find out one mental health clinic, no counseling, no nothing, right? But it's funny to me how we can be emboldened and go and spend our money with Sally, but we don't want to spend our money with Keisha because we have internalized this intergenerational trauma where we trust Sally, but we don't really trust Keisha, or we don't like how Keisha talk or how Keisha look, right? So we stereotyping, right? And so the systems, right, was set up to put us against one another. Black man against black man, black woman against black woman. You know, we fighting over the color of our hair, the texture of our hair, the way we look, if we got an education, don't have education, where we live at, what we drive. Well, all of that is superficial. For me, it's what's in your heart, right? And as a community, we have to learn how to love from the inside out. The word tells us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So for me, the first step is for us as Black and brown people to love the skin we are in. And I love the fact that I see so many African Americans going natural, being themselves, not try to assimilate to anybody else, because we don't have to assimilate. We have to be able to love ourselves for the way that God created us, however we look, no matter our skin color, no matter the texture of our hair, no matter where we work at, no matter if we have education, because we have the power to educate ourselves. We could pick up a book, you know, and like you're doing, Akira, we can affect change together.
Yes. Now, Akira, did you have something that you wanted to say? I thought
So the only thing I would add, I think Paula did a wonderful job just talking about what civil disobedience looks like in the streets. But I would like to take a step in. What does civil disobedience actually mean and actually look like? I think I would look at civil disobedience as a way in us doing what we want to do, because to be truly honest, as Black people, it almost seems like every aspect of our life is civil disobedience.
that's right.
We are being killed and slaughtered for no reason. We are constantly under attack in almost every institution and system in this country. So to me, that looks like doing things that we were taught or do not have access to anyway. I know specifically in Richmond, where I was from, I lived in a food desert. And so what civil disobedience can look like to me now in that area is having a community garden. So at Girls for Change, one thing that we do have a community garden. We teach our girls those resources and those skills that can look like civil disobedience to Black people. So that looks like learning about farming and gardening at our center. That looks like learning about coding and having access to that. That looks like us going out and going to these big corporations and companies and say, hey, hire our girls because they need experience in this area. And, you know, Black women should be valued, and we should have the opportunity to have these experiences. Just because they're not in our communities, we still deserve to have that type of luxury and that type of experience as well.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the civil disobedience. And then, you know, civil disobedience to me looks like the police are setting up a roadblock that's not, no, here we go. Like in my neighborhood, for example, they have installed some medans in the middle of the road, right? And they didn't tell anybody they were going to do it. Well, they did, but we didn't go to the NPU. That's a whole nother show. We didn't go to the community meeting to find out about it. That's another show. But the point is, we see those medans, right? And we see that it's not really working. It's upsetting the traffic flow. People are having accidents. Nobody can cross the street, you know. And so instead of adhering to those medans out of protest, we might ignore the medans and just cross over them anyway. You know, that's a form of civil disobedience that says, hey, we see that it's against the law, but because we believe that the law is unjust, we're gonna go in and do this anyway as a form of peaceful resistance. We're gonna resist something that we feel is unjust. So for me, that's a form of civil disobedience. It's a very primitive example, but for me, when we see things that are happening that are not right, like in my neighborhood, I was raised up in a food desert, also, Nakira, where we had to drive 15 and 20 minutes to get to a grocery store, and then the grocery store that we always went to was different from the ones that I would go. If I go over to Buckhead, it's a different, whole nother type of experience. But that's another show too.
Yeah.
A form of civil disobedience to me would say, "Hey, we're gonna go have this meeting with the head of this grocery store chain, and to say, why? How come you won't put a grocery store that's a little bit closer?" And then civil disobedience means that, hey, we ain't gonna go to that grocery store. Instead, we're gonna open up our own store, or we're gonna have community gardens. That, to me, that's what civil disobedience will do. And I know people are tired of everybody going back to what Dr. King did, but the Montgomery
Absolutely.
boycott, it was the same. It's just that you had a small group of people that rode the bus, and when they didn't ride the bus anymore, I mean, they were committed to not ride the bus and kept carpooling, etc. And when they didn't ride the bus anymore, then guess what happened to the Montgomery bus system? You see, so it gets into what a lot of theorists these days are talking about, this the systems that are in place, and how as African Americans we can impact those systems by basically either not using them or working against, devising schemes to work against them. And so, I mean, we talk about civil disobedience. I mean, what I noticed too is that I love the way this conversation is going, but I really want us to, focus on, the other thing that I'm seeing is that African American men and men of color are experiencing what we're going through from a different perspective when it comes to civil disobedience. And so whereas we might just go shop at another store, they may say, "Oh, we're gonna rob the store," and for some reason in their mindset, they think that's the right thing to do. And so that was the reason for that question. And where did that come from? Where did that mindset come from? And I can't help but still go back to the types of things that we have that have been embedded in the mindsets of men, especially African American men, over a period of time. Now, Nakira, Dr. Ducksworth had something good to say. She said that the community garden is an excellent investment in your young girls and a great investment in our family's health.
Absolutely.
And so we have that's one of the things that perspectives on we address is food insecurity. And so there is a coalition now that's aimed at educating people on how to start their own garden, so they don't have to rely heavily on going to the supermarket. And in fact, I always ask the question on these justice issues: how can the church and the body of faith respond to these justice issues? And Paula and Alyssa, there is a congregation there in Baltimore, as a matter of fact, that is doing just that. The Black Church, Black Church Food Network is right there, not too far away from you guys, where they actually are starting their own. They've gotten this coalition of churches across the country, and so we'll talk about that offline. We've had this conversation now. We've been live now for a little better than an hour, and I just kind of want to wrap this conversation up. It was great. I love the feedback, and I wanted us to try to wrap up the conversation by asking each of you to kind of chime in and tell me if you had, if given the opportunity on a national stage. We're trying to work and get perspectives on a national stage, but let's just say, you were on a national stage and you had an opportunity to give some advice. What advice would you give to males, black male, young males, your fathers, your brothers, on exactly where can we go from here? I mean, I've heard a little bit, I've heard just a tiny bit from each of you about some solutions. But if you had something to say right now to the males that you know, and especially those that are reacting to the recent events, what would you say to them to encourage them?
I know for me particularly, I'm all about community. I know that we have power in numbers. We really, like we all said, we have to make the difference in each other. So my advice would definitely be to get involved in your community, no matter what that looks like for you, because we are at a crucial point in what I'm calling this revolution, to where people are kind of backing off the media. So when we take away the media, it looks like nobody cares about it anymore. When the protests stop, because they're still going on, there's still work that we can do, and there's still work that we have to do. So I encourage everybody to get involved in their community. Like I said, at Girls for a Change, we do focus on girls, but we provide so many opportunities just for our community and families as a whole. So I know I said earlier about how important, how we know that the importance of, how we know about the importance of a relationship that a young girl has with her father. One thing that I did want to talk about is that we have this event called Date with Dad, where our girls many years ago came up with the idea that they wanted to have dances with their fathers, but a lot of the girls could not have that opportunity because their fathers were incarcerated, right? So we created an opportunity with our girls to have that opportunity to meet their fathers in jail. It took work, but it's not only the fact that the girls were able to have that opportunity in the jail. I've seen with my own eyes, as well as I had growing up, my father was incarcerated. So I know how big of a deal that was. So not only is this just a message to about those fathers being incarcerated, but we need our men to come and speak to those fathers who are incarcerated. We need our men to be in that community garden with our girls. We need our men to chime in and get involved in those community spaces. And again, it's going to take all of us together. But so my ending would be get involved in your community because it's what we have.
Okay, very good, and definitely that is definitely needed to help, especially African American men and men of color, to rechannel that energy that they're using to be angry, and channel it into something positive, like becoming involved in your community. Yeah. Anybody else?
And I would say for them to be able to write their own narrative, know who you are. You decide who you are. You decide your narrative. Don't allow other people, external people outside of yourself, to define who you are. You define who you are, and you empower yourself to rewrite the narrative that you desire, right? It does not matter what you've experienced and been through. That does not define who you are. You experience that. You take that as a learning curve and move forward, right? And so I always say, speak life. This is what I tell my husband: speak life.
Speak life.
Speak life. When we have to begin to speak life into ourselves as well as our young Black men, right?
Yes. The power is in the tongue. Absolutely.
The power
Yeah.
Life and death is in the tongue.
Yes.
That makes me, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
I was going to say that makes me think of how important rest is. I think rest is restorative and rest is productive. And we need to be doing things that continue to bring joy. Like, I think it doesn't, we should men should be involved in the communities and, continue to change their narrative. But in addition, making sure they're taking care of themselves. Mm-hmm. So whether that is, trying to pick up a book, whether that is going for walks and being active and doing all those things to experience joy, I think it's very important that they cultivate in themselves patterns and practices that actively help them build their bodies. It could be nutrition, just continue to take care of themselves so they can be restorative and then pour more into what they do end up doing. Yeah.
if I could give, that's beautiful. If I could give any piece of advice, we were talking about forms of civil disobedience, and for Black men, for them to just be themselves, that is a form of civil disobedience, because everyone is telling Black men what they have to be and what they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
You watch anime, fantastic. You watch Hannah Montana, you watch Zoe 101, you like the color pink, fantastic. You pick up your little sister off the bus, you're not mean to her, fantastic. You cry sometimes, you dance in front of the mirror, fantastic. Black men, be yourself. Be yourself, be yourself. You can cry. You can break down. You can be soft. You can be sensitive. You can, and you can do that. And that's not feminizing the Black man. It's not this agenda to make Black men soft. They're human. They don't have to be any crack in the Black man. And we're feminizing the Black man and the agenda, because we even as a community don't even let them be soft. And you need to be a man. And I would say to fathers, let your son cry. There's more than one way to be a man. Let your son go into that artistry. Let your son make his artisanal things. Let your son be an artist. Let your son do things that he wants to do. And he's still a man. You don't have to do one thing and be one way to be a man, and a strong Black man.
Right. And if you want your son to grow to be a man, that's one of the things that's going to provide a great foundation, is letting him be who he is.
Right.
What about you, Nakira? Did you have yours?
Yes.
Everybody know? Okay, so that's great. That's good stuff, ladies. And I guess maybe the conversations has been so good and so fulfilling, that I guess maybe I was just trying to get it to go a little longer. But we've been on for a little better than an hour, and I just wanted to just wrap up by saying I'm really pleased with everybody's participation and the viewership. I'm seeing that people are logging in just for this conversation, and my prayer is that this conversation will be like a healing balm for African American men. That is the entire premise of the Women's Laboratory. It's for us to talk about justice issues on how they affect us, as well as how they affect our men. And the reason why I wanted to focus in on the men is because when we look at the statistics, who's going to jail? When we look at the statistics, how many households do we have where it's just one parent, and that parent is a female? When we go to our churches and we look at our congregations, how many congregations do you know have majority male or have a significant number of males? How many, you go to Black Bible study, how many men are in Bible study? So I think that this conversation, this dialogue, this laboratory can be a part of the healing process, where we, as Dr. Malone says, where we break down or we dismantle what has been internalized by African American males in particular over time. Well, I thank you all for watching. A special thanks to Keystone Public Radio. And as we leave you, please remember those famous words from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. Good night, everyone. And once again, thank you for tuning in.
Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. We are a faith-based social justice forum where individuals give their perspectives on various topics. It's an opportunity to express their viewpoint, their stance, and their angle on justice issues affecting the community and globally. Each episode features guests presenting their perspective on things like climate change, the church, urban farming, and food insecurity, all through a unique faith lens. Come check us out. Give us your perspective.